Imagine stepping into a house so terrifying, so drenched in death, that it seems to breathe with a life of its own. The walls whisper, the floors groan, and the very air around you feels like a trap closing in. But worse than the shadows lurking in every corner is the chilling truth that no one who enters ever leaves the same, alive. Welcome to the Hell House. There's a place hidden deep within the woods, forgotten by time and ignored by most. It stands, decaying and ancient, but still breathing, still waiting, known only by whispers in local towns. It is referred to as the Hell House, an abandoned mansion that seems more like a monument to the dead than a home for the living. Many have ventured near, only to be driven mad, their souls forever scarred by what they witnessed within. Some have never returned at all. This house is not like any haunted house you've ever heard of. The air is thick with something ancient, something that feeds on fear itself. It has no mercy. It's as if the house itself is a living, breathing organism with an insatiable hunger for your terror. And so, one fateful day, a group of expert paranormal investigators, skeptics, and mediums are drawn to this forsaken place. They come armed with equipment, research, and their own doubts about the supernatural. But what they don't know is that the Hell House has been waiting for them for years. It's not just their skills that are under scrutiny, it's their minds, their very souls. But will they uncover the dark secrets buried in the house's decaying walls? Or will they become just another chapter in its cursed history? Long before the house became a place of nightmares, it was a grand estate nestled in the heart of the woods. In the early 1900s, the mansion was built by a wealthy family with a dark secret. Rumors circulated that the house had been constructed atop ancient burial grounds, a place where old rituals had been performed. But the family was blind to the warnings and ignored the superstition, determined to create their paradise untouched by the outside world. Strangely enough, no one ever seemed to stay long enough to enjoy it. The first owners died under mysterious circumstances. Some say it was a tragic accident. Others believe it was the house itself that drove them to madness. After their death, the mansion sat vacant for years, but that didn't stop the sinister reputation from growing. Neighbors spoke of strange lights flickering at night and of eerie sounds echoing from within, cries, whispers, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Even those brave enough to venture near the house could feel that something was wrong. It wasn't just the silence that unnerved them. It was the oppressive feeling that something was always watching, lurking, waiting for its next victim. But the house, as true horror, began when a new family moved in, a family that would be the last to ever occupy the mansion. This family, drawn by the mystery, and the sheer isolation of the place, had no idea what they were walking into. It wasn't long before the parents noticed strange occurrences. Objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, and the feeling that they were never truly alone. The children spoke of shadows that followed them, faces staring through the windows when no one was there, and voices calling their names in the dead of night. Desperate, the family contacted paranormal investigators, hoping for answers. The investigators arrived, only to find themselves engulfed by the house's power. One by one, their equipment malfunctioned, and the investigators began to experience hallucinations, visions of things that didn't exist, distorted faces, and memories that weren't their own. As days passed, the house seemed to grow stronger, feeding on their fear, until the investigators fled physically and mentally broken. But not before they reported something truly horrifying. One of the investigators swore they saw the very walls of the house pulse, as though it were alive, as though it were breathing. And so, the mansion sat abandoned once again, the whispers of its cursed history growing louder. Each new owner that came, and each new investigation that followed, met with the same fate. But no one truly understood the depth of the house's evil. No one could fathom the kind of power it held. Over time, the legend of the Hell House only grew darker. Some locals claimed it was haunted by the spirits of those who died there, trapped between life and death. Others believed the house was a doorway to another realm, a realm where dark forces whispered and took control of anyone who dared enter. But there was another, even more terrifying possibility. The idea that the house itself wasn't haunted by spirits at all. It wasn't a collection of restless souls. It was something alive. The house was a living entity, ancient and powerful. Its walls holding the power to trap souls, to twist them into something unrecognizable. It wasn't just the house that was haunted, was the land, the very earth that it stood on, sclute with centuries of suffering, pain, and unimaginable terror. The Hell House had been built on the remains of rituals, sacrifices, and forgotten rites. It had been designed to trap and consume life, to feed off the living. And somehow, after all these years, it still remained. Waiting. The house didn't just want to kill. It wanted to break you body, mind, and soul in, till you were lost forever, consumed by its malevolent power. No one understood this when they entered. No one knew the true evil that lingered within. But as the mansion's history grew, so did its hunger. And now, the house was calling again. It was a crisp, overcast morning when the team of investigators arrived at the Hell House. The group consisted of 4 individuals, each with their own expertise and approach to the paranormal. But none of them truly prepared for the horrors they would soon face. There was Dr. Lionel Barrett, a respected scientist and skeptic, known for his logical mind and dismissive attitude toward anything supernatural. Then there was Florence Tanner, a gifted medium who claimed to communicate with spirits. Her sensitive nature, both an asset and a curse. Alongside them was Edward Marlowe, a psychic researcher obsessed with proving the existence of otherworldly forces, driven by a personal tragedy that haunted him. Lastly, there was the young, ambitious photographer, Ben Fisher, who had a reputation for capturing strange phenomena on film, but often dismissed it as a trick of light. They had been hired by the mansion's current owner, a desperate heir who wanted answers no one had ever been able to provide. Despite their differing views on the supernatural, they all shared a single goal: to uncover the truth about the Hell House. Little did they know, their lives were about to change in ways they could never have imagined. The team approached the mansion with caution. Even from a distance, the house appeared suffocating, the rotting exterior like the skin of a carcass left to decay in the elements. A thick fog clung to the ground, and the trees surrounding the estate swayed as if moved by some invisible hand. There was no welcoming presence, here only the unsettling sensation of being watched. As they stepped inside, the air turned frigid. The mansion was silent, but not in the usual way. It was a dead silence, the kind that presses in on you, making each breath feel like an intrusion. The floors creaked underfoot, and the walls groaned, as though the house itself was trying to speak. Florence shivered, her senses immediately assaulted by the negative energy in the air. "This place, it's alive," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. But Dr. Barrett, ever the skeptic, only scoffed, his rational mind dismissing her words as nonsense. They set up their equipment in the grand parlor. The room was vast, with towering windows that let in just enough light to cast strange shadows on the walls. The furniture was draped in white sheets, untouched for years, and the fireplace was cold, as though no warmth had touched it for decades. The team's instruments were humming with static, their lights flickering as they tried to establish a baseline for the paranormal readings. As night fell, the temperature in the house dropped even further. Florence began to feel the presence of something ancient, malevolent. She sat cross-legged in the middle of the room, her eyes closed as she attempted to reach out with her psychic senses. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "They're here. They're watching us." At first, the team didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. But then, the house began to respond. It started with a faint sound, low guttural growl coming from the direction of the staircase. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Perhaps a rodent, perhaps the house itself settling. But then it grew louder, more distinct. The growl morphed into something else, almost human-like, whispering, calling out to them in a language none of them could understand. Florence's face went pale, her eyes wide with terror. "Do you hear that?" she gasped. "It's coming for us." Before anyone could react, the temperature dropped suddenly, and a chilling wind blew through the room. Though all the windows were tightly shut, the lights flickered wildly, and the room seemed to twist and stretch. Shadows seemed to move independently of the furniture, inching closer to them like hungry predators. One of the chairs overturned on its own, crashing to the floor with a deafening noise. Ben, the photographer, instinctively reached for his camera, his fingers trembling. The lens focused on the chair, but when he glanced back at the rest of the room, the shadows were different, deeper, darker, and more alive. One of them was ... moving. "Did anyone see that?" Ben stammered, his voice barely audible over the growing hum of static from the equipment. His camera snapped a photo, and in the frame, there was a figure, a dark silhouette, standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Edward Marlowe, driven by both fear and curiosity, began to chant in a low voice, invoking spiritual protection. But with each word, the house seemed to respond more violently. A door slammed shut, and the windows rattled as though struck by an invisible force. "Stop it," Dr. Barrett shouted. He was no longer acting as a calm, rational scientist. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his notes. "We need to leave. This isn't scientific. This is something else." But it was too late. The house was not just reacting to them. Meat was feeding on their fear. The shadows grew longer, swirling and twisting as if alive, circling them like hungry predators. Florence collapsed to the floor, her screams echoing through the mansion as the whispers grew louder, more frantic. She clawed at the ground, her eyes wide with terror. "Get out," she screamed. "It's not just haunted, it's alive. It wants us. It's feeding on us." But the doors wouldn't open. The house had sealed them in. The night wore on. The investigators' sanity began to slip. Each one experienced a personal terror visions of their pasts, faces of loved ones twisted into grotesque forms, and the overwhelming sensation of being trapped in a place with no escape. The house's evil was not just in the physical realm, twisted their minds, making them doubt everything they had ever known. In the dark corners of the house, something was watching, and it wasn't human. Without warning, the lights flickered once more, and then went completely out. For a moment, they were engulfed in total darkness, thick, suffocating darkness. It wasn't the kind of dark that brought peace, but the kind that suffocated you, made you feel like you were being buried alive. Then came the sound, the scraping of something heavy moving along the floor. The dragging noise was closer now, impossibly close, and it was coming from the direction of the staircase. Dr. Barrett grabbed the nearest flashlight, his hands shaking as he pointed it toward the stairs. The beam of light flickered, revealing nothing. But when it blinked back on, a shape stood at the top of the stairs, tall, menacing, its features hidden by shadow. A low growl vibrated through the air, and then the thing stepped forward into the light. It was like no human they had ever seen. Its face was a grotesque mask of contorted flesh, eyes that seemed to burn with hatred and malice. And its skin, it could even be called skin, was a patchwork of rotting, decayed tissue. It was a thing that should not exist. Florence screamed, and in that instant, the creature lunged. Panic erupted as the investigators bolted, their senses overwhelmed. They scrambled for the door, but it was locked. The handle wouldn't turn, no matter how much they yanked at it. The room had become a cage, its walls pressing in closer with every second, its very foundation shifting beneath their feet. Ben rushed to the windows, but the glass refused to break, no matter how hard he pounded on it. Behind him, the air grew colder still, the whispers becoming a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, urging him to join them. To stay, he turned to look at the others. But the room was spinning. Florence was no longer there. Her body crumpled on the floor, her eyes wide and unseeing. Edward and Dr. Barrett were frozen in place, their faces pale, their bodies stiff with fear. The creature stood behind them, its gaping maw wide open, as if preparing to devour them whole. But when the light flickered once again, it was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Barrett, Ben, and Edward were the only ones left standing, or rather, staggering. Florence was gone, as was the creature. The house seemed to be still. For the first time, in what felt like an eternity, there was no movement, no whispers, no dragging footsteps. But the horror wasn't over. It could never truly be over. As they stumbled out of the mansion, broken and bloodied, they glanced back at the Hell House. The structure stood tall against the darkened sky, its windows glowing faintly with a light that wasn't quite natural. The air was still, but it wasn't peaceful. It was as if the house was biding its time, waiting. "You think it's over?" Edward whispered hoarsely, his voice barely a breath. "It wants us." Ben looked at him, his face pale, haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. "No, it's not over. It's never over." Dr. Barrett said nothing. He simply stood there, staring at the mansion, feeling the weight of its evil pressing on him. He had once believed that all things could be explained by logic and science, but now he knew the truth. Some things defied explanation. Some things were pure evil, twisted beyond comprehension, and they were still out there, lurking in the darkness. As they turned and walked away, the house stood silently behind them, as if it had never moved, never changed. But somewhere, deep within its decaying walls, something still waited. And it would never stop, it would never let go.